The moment my mother-in-law clinked her wine glass and announced to the entire restaurant that my husband would be covering the table, all 14 people, 3 bottles of Bordeaux, and the prime rib everyone had ordered without blinking. I felt something go very still inside me. Not panic, not the usual flush of humiliation I'd carried for 3 years, just stillness. The kind that comes when you've already made your decision and you're simply waiting for the world to catch up. My name is Cora, and I've been married to my husband Owen for 3 years. Before that, I dated him for 2. 5 years of loving a man who loves his mother more than he loves the truth. I'm 31. I'm a licensed CPA. I manage the books for 11 small businesses in our city, and I've been doing it since I was 26. I say this not to brag, but because it matters. It matters that I know exactly what money looks like when it moves. It matters that I can read a bank statement the way other people read a text message instantly, completely, without missing a single word. His mother's name is Lorraine. She's 63, retired from nothing in particular, and has spent the better part of the last decade treating her son like a personal expense account. When Owen and I got serious, I thought maybe I'd misread her. She brought wine to our first dinner together. She hugged me at Christmas. She said, and I remember this clearly because I've turned it over in my head 1,000 times since, that she was so glad Owen had finally found someone grounded. I understand now that grounded meant solvent. It started small. It always does. A dinner here, a car repair there. Owen's younger sister, Tiffany, had a baby and needed a crib, and somehow the bill ended up on our joint card. I mentioned it once. Owen said it was family, that Tiffany was struggling, that it wasn't a big deal. I let it go. That was my first mistake, and I made it voluntarily, and I've never stopped paying for it. By year 2 of our marriage, Lorraine was calling Owen twice a week with something new. The roof needed patching. Her HOA dues were due. She'd found a cruise deal that was too good to pass up and just needed someone to cover the deposit until her next Social Security check, which, by the way, she receives in full every month and spends completely on things that are not roof repairs or HOA dues. I started keeping a spreadsheet. I do that when something bothers me. I document. In 2 years, Owen had transferred or charged just over $19,000 to our joint accounts for his mother and his sister. $19,412. I have every transaction. I have the dates, the amounts, the merchant names. I have the 3 times Lorraine texted me directly asking if I could spot her for something, and the 0 times she ever paid me back or acknowledged it afterward. Owen knew I knew some of it. He did not know I knew all of it. The birthday dinner was Lorraine's idea, her 63rd, at a steakhouse in the city that I will not name, but that charges $48 for a side of truffle mac and cheese. She had invited 14 people, most of whom I barely knew, cousins, her book club friends, a neighbor named Gerald, who showed up in a bolo tie and ate 2 appetizers before the breadbasket even arrived. Owen had mentioned the dinner to me 2 weeks before, very casually. The way he mentions things, he's already decided. He said his mom wanted to celebrate big this year. He said it would be a nice evening. He did not say he planned to pay for all of it. He didn't have to. I already knew. What he didn't know was what I'd done 3 days earlier. I want to explain that because it matters to the story and because I want you to understand that I didn't act impulsively. I'm not an impulsive person. I had been thinking about this moment for 4 months. I had spoken to a family law attorney, not because I was sure I wanted a divorce, but because I wanted to understand what was mine and what wasn't. I had quietly opened a new checking account at a separate bank, not our credit union, not the joint account, a different institution entirely. I had moved my direct deposit there 6 weeks before the birthday dinner. I had paid off and closed my half of the joint card, and the night of the dinner, before we left the house, I had slipped my new card into my clutch and left the joint card sitting on my nightstand. Owen didn't notice. He was too busy ironing his shirt and talking on the phone with Tiffany about what time she was meeting them there. The restaurant was warm and loud in that particular way. Expensive places are on Saturday nights. Lorraine was already there when we arrived, already halfway through a glass of champagne, already holding court at the head of the table in a sequin top she clearly bought for the occasion. She lit up when she saw Owen. She gave me a side hug, the kind where only our shoulders touched. I sat down. I smiled. I ordered the salmon. For an hour and a half, I watched. Lorraine ordered for the table. She told the server they'd be doing family style and then named dishes she hadn't asked anyone else about. She refilled her wine before anyone else's glass was touched. She told a story 3 times about a trip she'd taken to Sedona in 2019, and each time it got slightly more elaborate. Owen laughed every time. Then the plates were cleared and Lorraine clinged her glass. She thanked everyone for coming. She said family was everything. She looked at Owen with the specific expression I'd watched her use for years. Not quite pride, more like ownership, and she said, "I think it's time to settle up. My son takes such good care of his mother." She laughed. Everyone laughed. It was a performance so smooth it must have been rehearsed. Owen reached across the table for my clutch, the way he always does when there's a bill. We'd fallen into that habit early in our marriage, his hand reaching, my bag open, never a word exchanged. It had felt like partnership once. I'd been stupid enough to think that's what it was. He unzipped the clutch. He pulled out the card. I watched his face as he carried it to the card reader the server had brought over. I watched him insert it. I watched him punch in the amount, the screen face away from me. But I knew it was somewhere north of $800 because I had done the math in my head from the menu before we even sat down. The machine beeped, not the soft, clean chime of approval. The other sound, the short, flat, indifferent beep that means no. That. Owen looked at the screen. He withdrew the card and tried again, slower this time, the way people do when they're hoping the machine made a mistake. It beeped again. Lorraine leaned forward slightly. "Everything okay, honey?" Owen's jaw tightened. He came back to the table and leaned down toward me, voice low. "It's not going through. Do you have another card in here?" "Which card is that?" I asked. He showed me. It was the joint card. I looked at it for a moment. Then I looked up at him. "That account is closed." He stared at me. "What?" "I closed it a few weeks ago." Across the table, Lorraine had gone very still. She had the hearing of a woman who has spent decades listening for financial information. Owen straightened up. His voice was controlled, but barely. "Cora, what are you talking about?" "I can explain later," I said, "but that card won't work." He looked around the table. 14 people. Gerald with his bolo tie. Tiffany bouncing the baby on her knee. All of the Rains book club friends who had eaten the truffle, Mac and drained the Bordeaux and were now watching with the particular alertness of people who smell drama. "Do you have another card?" Owen asked. "Yes," I said. He held out his hand. I looked at his hand. I looked at his hand. I looked at his face. 3 years of dinners, deposits, transfer spreadsheets, and $19,000 whole in our savings. And one conversation I'd had with myself at 2 in the morning 6 months ago, where I'd ask myself how much longer I was going to do this. "I do have another card," I said calmly, "but I'm not going to hand it to you to pay for this dinner." Someone at the table inhaled. Lorraine sat down her wine glass. "Excuse me." I turned to look at her directly, not angry. I want to be clear about that. I was not angry in that moment. Anger would have felt like too much energy, and I had been saving mine. I didn't say I wouldn't pay. I said I wasn't going to hand it to Owen to pay. I stood up, smoothed my dress, and walked over to the server myself. I handed her my card, the new one, the one connected only to my account, and I told her to run the full check. Owen had followed me with his eyes across the room. When I came back to the table, his expression had shifted from controlled to something closer to afraid. Lorraine was the first to speak. "Well," she said with the tone of someone reasserting gravity, "I suppose that's one way to make a scene at your mother-in-law's birthday dinner." "I haven't made a scene," I said pleasantly. "I just paid the bill. You humiliated my son. I paid $847 for your birthday dinner, Lorraine. I'd say your son came out fine." Tiffany made a sound somewhere between a gasp and a laugh, then covered it with a cough. Lorraine's chin lifted after everything we've done for you, after the way this family has welcomed you. And that's where I stopped her, not rudely. I simply said, I have a spreadsheet. She blinked. I beg your pardon. I keep records. It's what I do for a living. I reached into my clutch, the same clutch Owen had just rifled through looking for a card that no longer worked, and I pulled out my phone. I had the document saved as a PDF. I had prepared this not because I planned to show it at her birthday dinner necessarily, but because I had learned that when you have documentation, you keep it close. $19,412. That's what Owen and I have paid toward your expenses, Tiffany's expenses, and 2 other family requests over the past 2 years. I have every date, every amount, every account it came from. I set the phone down on the table, screen up. So, when you say, after everything we've done for you, I'd be genuinely curious to hear what that is because I've been keeping the counter on the other side of the ledger, and I can tell you with professional certainty that it does not balance. The table was silent in a way that a table of 14 people very rarely is. Owen sat down slowly. Cora, I'm not finished. I said it gently. I meant it gently. I'm not doing this to embarrass you. I'm doing this because I have been quiet for 3 years and quiet hasn't worked, so I'm trying something else. Lorraine looked at her son. Are you going to let her talk to me like this? Owen opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again, and for the first time in the 5 years I had known him, he did not come to his mother's defense. I don't know if it was the spreadsheet or the closed account, or simply the fact that standing in a restaurant in front of 14 people with an unpayable bill had finally made something real to him that I had been trying to make real for 2 years. But he was quiet. I picked up my phone. I sat back down. I finished my water. Lorraine left 20 minutes later before the server brought back my card. She kissed her book club friends on the cheek, people for coming, and walked out without looking at me. Tiffany gathered her baby in her diaper bag and gave Owen a long speaking look, the kind that means we'll talk about this later, and followed her mother out. Gerald stayed for the complimentary birthday survey the restaurant brought and seemed to have a perfectly nice time. On the drive home, Owen was silent for so long. I thought he might stay that way all night. We were almost to our exit when he finally said, You could have told me. I did tell you, I said. Twice in year 1. Once in year 2. You told me it was temporary. He was quiet again. Then the account. When did you close it? 3 weeks ago. Were you going to tell me? Yes. After tonight. He turned that over. I watched the highway light slide across his face. He looked tired in a way that had nothing to do with the hour. Are you leaving? He asked. I thought about how to answer that honestly. I don't know yet, I said, but something has to change. Not eventually, not after the next emergency. Something has to change now, and I need to know that you understand that. And I need to know that you mean it. He didn't say anything for a while. When he did, what he said was the 19,000. I didn't know it was that much. I know, I said. That's part of the problem. The next morning, I sent Lorraine a copy of the spreadsheet by email. Not to be cruel, I included a note that was 3 sentences long. It said that I had no interest in being her enemy. It said that I was happy to have a relationship with her that was built on something other than financial access to her son. It said that if she chose to respond to that, I was open to a conversation. She read it. I could see the reader receipt and did not respond for 11 days. When she finally did, it was a text, not an email, and it was 4 words. We should talk soon. I didn't respond immediately. I made her wait 2 days, not out of spite, but because I had a full week of client work, and also because I have learned somewhere between the spreadsheet and that birthday dinner that my time is worth something, that it has always been worth something. I just stopped acting like it for a while. Owen and I have been in couples counseling for 6 weeks now. Our therapist is a small, precise woman named Dr. Something I'll keep to myself, and she has a way of asking questions that makes it impossible to answer them with anything other than the truth. Owen has said things in that office I didn't expect him to say. I have said things I didn't expect to say either. I don't know yet if our marriage survives this. I think that's honest. I think that's okay. What I know is this. The evening I handed my own card to that server and paid $847 for a dinner I didn't choose at a restaurant. I didn't pick for a birthday I wasn't consulted about. That was the last time I paid for something I didn't agree to. Not because I made a grand declaration, not because I won some argument, but because I had moved my money and I had my documentation, and when the moment came, I was simply ready. I don't need everyone at the table to understand. I only needed myself to finally act like I did. There's a particular kind of exhaustion that comes not from working hard, but from working hard for people who never once ask if you're tired. I know that exhaustion. I lived inside it for 3 years. And the strange thing is, I didn't even fully recognize it until the night it lifted. What happened at that birthday dinner wasn't luck. It wasn't fate. It was the direct result of a simple equation I had finally stopped ignoring. Every action compounds. Every transfer Owen made without asking me. Every dinner Lorraine assumed I'd cover. Every time I said nothing and paid anyway. Those weren't isolated moments. They were a pattern, and patterns don't break themselves. I had to decide to break it, and then I had to actually do the work of breaking it. That's the part people don't talk about enough, the doing. It's easy to be angry. It's easy to feel wronged. What's hard is sitting down at your kitchen table at 11 at night, opening a spreadsheet, and documenting every transaction with the same precision you'd bring to a client's books. What's hard is making an appointment with an attorney before you know exactly what you want just because you believe you deserve to understand your own options. What's hard is opening a new bank account, moving your direct deposit, and not telling anyone. Not out of deception, but out of the quiet knowledge that your financial security is yours to protect first. That's what I mean when I say I used my head. Not in a cold way, in a clear-eyed, honest way. Lorraine was not a villain in some story. She was a woman who had learned over many years that certain behaviors produced certain results. She asked. Then Owen paid, and nobody said stop. I was part of that system. I let myself be. Understanding that really sitting with it instead of just being angry about it was what made the difference between reacting and actually changing something. And then there's the matter of staying the course. Because the night of that dinner, when Lorraine lifted her chin and said I'd humiliated her son, every instinct I'd spent years cultivating told me to soften it, to apologize, to smooth it over and figure out the hard part later. I didn't. Not because I was fearless. I wasn't, but because I had made a decision and I had the documentation to stand behind it. And I understood finally that backing down in that moment would have cost me far more than the $847 I just paid. Doing the right thing when it's uncomfortable, that's not a personality trait some people have and others don't. It's a muscle. I hadn't been using mine. Lorene's red receipt sitting unacknowledged for 11 days didn't hurt me the way it would have a year earlier, because I had finally stopped measuring my worth by how quickly someone responded to me. I don't know yet how my marriage ends. I know how that evening ended. I paid my own bill, said what was true, and walked out into the night air feeling like myself for the first time in a very long time. Whatever comes next, I built that. Nobody handed it to me. I documented it, planned it, and when the moment came, I didn't flinch. That's the only thing I'd want anyone to take from this. Not anger at Owen, not judgment of Lorraine, just this. Know your numbers, trust your own clarity.